Well, for more on this, I spoke with Brian Ray. He's president of the National Home Education Research Institute right here in the United States. I began by asking him about the main reasons people choose homeschooling.
One of the most important aspects of it is that it customizes the education for each child according to his or her strengths, weaknesses, desires, and dreams. And so it's a very customized, natural, and very historical form of education.
And as we look at some of this customized education, what are some of the main reasons then people either choose to be homeschooled or to homeschool their children?
Yeah, I think, what we find in the research is obviously people think it's going to provide a good academic education, reading, writing, arithmetic, some science and history, those kinds of things. People also believe that it's very good and educators believe it's good to customize education. That is one of the best ways to go in education. And people also see that it can be very open to the teachable moment. And it is also very family oriented, so there's much more time to spend developing relationships within the family, parent to child, sibling to sibling. So these are the main reasons. And I would say the last one is not the least important, but it allows families and parents to pass on values and beliefs rather than have government schools do that with the children.
Now, let's also look at some of the stereotypes and some of the misconceptions that are really attached to this. What are the ones that tend to come up the most?
Well, I think they're dying, these stereotypes, but there was a time up until maybe about 5 years ago, many people in America or other nations thought that only strongly, zealously religious people homeschooled, or very left-wing, moved to the country and alternative people homeschooled. Well, there was only an element of truth to that, but what we see now in the United States and many nations is that there's a huge variety of people. These are people who are middle of the road politically. These are people who are very left-wing politically, very right-wing politically. We have wealthy people. We have poorer people. We have parents with 2 PhDs and parents who both barely finished secondary school who homeschool their children. So there's a very wide variety of people homeschooling today, and that's one of the biggest changes that people see, both in terms of their misconceived stereotypes, but also reality.
Now, homeschooling is also a trend that we're seeing in China that's gaining some momentum, because some parents really do want a less rigid sort of schooling there. How would you say that homeschooling has developed as an alternative in China?
What I've seen in China, the little bit that I know, I've been there twice, is that an increasing number of parents are realizing that the institutional model that focuses on the same thing for everybody creates a lot of stress for the children. It's not necessarily the best thing pedagogically. So these families in China, just like in the United Kingdom, in Canada, United States, Australia, realizing the customized education, the more relaxed education that home-based education offers could be really good for their children. They also see that even though there might be a lot of competition on exams to get into college or university, the children who are home-based education can focus on the same subjects, but under less stress and more at their own speed than children in an institutional school.
Now, we know that one thing that weighs very heavily on the minds of Chinese children is the big Gaokao exam that they have to take. But then what kind of challenges could homeschooling have then for children who want to take the Gaokao? What sort of avenues could be available?
Well, let's look at 2 possibilities. If the government or whoever is in charge of the Gaokao is open and transparent and lets people know what the subjects are to study for the test, then home-based education children are in just as good a position, maybe better than others, because they have more time to focus on education, fewer distractions. But if the government or those who are in charge of the exam are not open about what's on the exams, the kinds of subjects, that could be a problem for children. I think that's the main thing. Secondly, we find in most nations where home education is done, it's legal and so forth, if the universities treat them fairly like everybody else, if they do well in the Gaokao, treat them fairly like everybody else if they do well in the Gaokao, and don't try to hold them to the same concepts, institutional school concepts as others, like certain kinds of diplomas from certain schools. Those are the most important things to think about.
Now, what about the broader picture here? What are some of the countries where homeschooling is most widely accepted, and why are they more accepting of it?
Well, I'm sure some of it has to do with societal values and beliefs. I mean, the United States was founded on a lot of concepts of independence and liberty and choice and those kinds of things. So we see homeschooling has grown amazingly in the United States in the 1970s from almost extinct to over 2 million children now. So it's part of it's cultural. It's where people are more open to concepts, more open to what works, regardless of the institutional model. Many people in many nations think that whatever is average is good. In the countries where homeschooling is exploding, they do not accept that a priori presupposition. In other words, hey, they want to look at what works well and then they go for it. So I think that's what maybe will be a challenge in China. I don't know the culture very well, but if they start looking at what works well, they'll say, hey, home-based education works really well.
And just lastly, Brian, are there any key trends that you're seeing globally when it comes to homeschooling that really should be on people's radar?
The trends that I see is that homeschooling is becoming much more widely accepted. Even while it's being more widely accepted, we have many university professors, not many, I should say, some university professors, some policymakers who do not like the concept of educational freedom. So even though it's legal, they try to create more and more regulations to control it that goes along with the government school system. I think people who like educational freedom should be careful about that.